Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. This time we are taking a look at the Livewire Dalek Modulator. The Dalek, like its brother the Vulcan modulator, is based on two cross-modulatable oscillators. The Dalek, on the one hand, is primarily audio rate oscillators, where the Vulcan is a low frequency. It also has both oscillators normaled into a ring modulator output, the left side being the carrier and the right side being the modulator. Both oscillators have voltage control over their rate, horizontal symmetry controls, as well as a switchable rate range. High is primarily all audio rate frequencies, whereas low is low audio and almost LFO speeds. It's a little bit, well, it's about the same range as the Vulcan when it's in high mode. The sort of faster speeds of the Vulcan are the lower speeds there on the Dalek. Also, like the Vulcan, you can have the oscillators cross-modulate by simply turning up either oscillator's CV input attenuator without patching a external control voltage signal. On the inputs and outputs, we have individual outputs for each oscillator, and above those is the toggle switch for if you want sine wave or square wave for each oscillator, and these do affect the type of waveform that's going normal to the ring modulator as well. The ring mod itself output is right here, and it has a switch. I don't technically know what this does, but the labels obey and destroy are pretty accurate to the sound. Obey is pretty normal and destroy is really nice and aggressive. Finally, the ring mod section also has external inputs for both carrier and modulator. This is really cool because you can patch in any external voltage to ring mod without having to use the two oscillators. They can be used for something else independently. And each external in has a switch for either AC or DC style voltage inputs. One final note on the inputs: the rate CV inputs for the two oscillators are not 1 volt per octave scale, so they won't track a keyboard voltage like the Model 15 or a normal oscillator. So for those that were curious, it won't do that. All right, let's check this thing out in action. Alright, to start off, what I'm going to do is we just have the ring mod out patched here, both in audio rate ranges, and pretty much kind of zeroed out. And I'll just flip a couple switches, turn a couple knobs for you to get the overall, just general sound of how the Dalek works. Mess with the symmetry here a bit. Some cross modulation maybe. Switch this to, this is the carrier to square wave. Nice and brutal. It's the destroy switch. See, pretty descriptive. Alright, let's patch up something a little more interesting. Okay, what I've got here is basically the same patch as before. The modulator's CV input is coming from the smooth output on the Plan B Heisenberg. The stepped output of the Heisenberg is controlling the carrier output, and that's being clocked by the Model 28 tap clock. I've chosen to use both square waves for the carrier and the modulator because that adds a real nice aggressive kind of hairy sound, and that's going through a frequency dynamo with a very light filter sweep controlled by the Vulcan. Let's give that a listen. It's kind of like demented circus music. Okay, so what we've got here is each of the oscillators patched into each half of a Model 13 dual timbre gate, and the ring mod out going into the frequency diner like before, with a little more of a filter sweep being controlled by the Vulcan. That all gets mixed together, and then we're hearing the output of that. The dual timbral gates are being opened by the accent outs of the eighth notes for the top half of the gate, and the triplets accents for the bottom half of the gate. And I'll flip a couple of the accent switches while we're listening to it. Let's check it out. Alright, for this patch we're going to actually exploit one of the little quirks of the Dalek, and that quirk is when one oscillator is in the high frequency mode and the other is in the low frequency mode, the lower one modulates the other one very slightly, even if you have both these CV inputs turned down. So they're not supposed to be cross-modulating each other, but they do. Some people might not like it. I think it's really cool, and it lends you to be able to do certain things they're going to do here in this patch. So again, we're listening to the ring mod out. It's going through the frequency diner with a slight sweep, just like before. The square wave out of the modulator, again, this is in low mode, so it's cross-modulating this one slightly, even though we're not really intending it to. The square wave out of that is triggering a new stepped voltage from the Model 24 Heisenberg, and that step voltage is coming out and controlling the pitch of the carrier. So really what we're listening to is the carrier's pitch change, and this slight imparted modulation of the modulator on the carrier, and the ring mod of all the result of that. It's a lot easier if you just hear it. That slight click that you can probably hear, that's that extra bit of modulation. Like if we just listen to the output here. So you can hear that modulate it. Oh, that's pretty cool too. Pick up new stuff each time. Alright, in our final patch here, I'll show you kind of the stuff I like to use the Dalek for all the time, which is basically just high rate modulation, and it's what it really excels at. What I'm doing here is the carrier oscillator. I'm using the out of that set to a square wave that's going into the frequency diner. I've patched the ring mod out of the two oscillators back into the rate control of the carrier, so it's a little sort of self modulation. The sine wave out of the modulator oscillator is going to the FM input of the frequency diner, so we're going to frequency modulate the filter. It's also still getting a little bit of a sweep from that Vulcan, and you'll hear the timbre in the beginning. It's not that cool sounding, but listen as I turn up the CV input of the modulator, which is basically going to cross modulate from the carrier oscillator. It sounds really cool. We can tune it here to get it to a nice steady pitch. And that, folks, is the Dalek Modulator. Like all the modules I get, I highly suggest it. It's tons of fun. and it makes a great oscillator if you don't already have one. Like I said, it won't track 1 volt per octave, but it was the first oscillator I had before I got the Model 15, and aside from, playing with the keyboard, which I don't like doing that much, it works great. Tune in next time. Don't know what I'll be demoing, but hopefully it'll be cool.